Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to be starting a three-part series where we're going to go over the flying, operation, navigation, takeoff, landing of the F-104, actually the TF-104, and this is the G version that was just made available by Skunk Works. Now one thing I'm going to say right in the beginning is there's a couple little bugs that I've encountered as I've been kind of experimenting with this, especially trying to do things by the book, so we're going to have to kind of experiment with a little bit of kind of as we go, but for the most part it's pretty complete and we'll go ahead and get to it. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first things first, when you're operating this airplane, you have to remember that this airplane is designed from the outset not to be completely independent, which means if you were to do something like come to the top of the screen, click on fuel right here, you notice that we have payload, but we're not carrying any fuel whatsoever. Now, you're sitting there going, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? Well, the interesting thing is the program itself comes with an external tool that's going to be called TF-104G setup or Lady setup. So if I actually go ahead and pop this sucker over real quick, you can see exactly what this application looks like. This application actually does a lot of really cool things for us. The first thing it will do is allow us to put fuel in the airplane in the beginning. It'll allow us to select our fly file, which is something we'll deal with a little bit later on. It's also going to give us the ability to plug in the cart for starting, although there are some shortcut keys we can use for this. It's going to allow us to identify things for Tachyon frequencies. For example, if we need to identify that we're on 31 X-ray, that simply means that we're on 109.4. The other thing it provides us for is this crivation, which is basically going to allow us to identify our magnetic deviation. Now, when it comes to magnetic deviation, one of the things I always like to say is it's a pretty straightforward experience. We're actually going to get into this in a minute. But what we're going to be interested in today is we're going to be interested in putting a little bit of fuel in this airplane and then going ahead and getting it started, bring it over to the runway, and then kind of getting us going. So let's begin with that. So I'm going to go up to intro. The first thing you want to do is come down here. It says clean stores. You have clean tip tanks, pylon and tip tanks. Today I'm going to be operating with the tip tanks. Of course, as soon as you click that button, you'd expect this little box to appear, but it warns you right in the bottom. You can't actually put any fuel into it unless you activate the refueling switch. So if you come to the airplane itself and come to the bottom right corner, there's this little switch that says refueling switch. We just click on it and then left click on it once, and now notice you now have that ability. All right, so now we're applying 4,400 pounds of fuel in the internal and 2,300 pounds in the tips. I'm going to press the apply now button. The whole plane goes, as it gets instantaneously fueled up. I'm going to come over here and go ahead and close the switch. We don't need this switch anymore. We will need this tool again in just a moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our checklist. So first things first, as far as the pre-flight stuff goes, most of the pre-flight things are kind of automatically done for you, so you don't have to stress out too much with a lot of those different items. Instead, we're going to start with the interior check and kind of work our way down. So the first thing that we're interested in is our little foot retractors. So in this aircraft, I don't know that we're going to be able to see this well. Let me go poke down here a little bit. You basically have these special tension cables built into your legs. You actually have harnesses you stick your legs into. So when you eject, it actually pulls you into a tight ball before knocking you out the back and over that, nasty tail that's sitting there right there. If you were to skip this step, it would not end well for you. Next thing we do is we go ahead and set up all of our survival equipment. And we're going to make sure everything's plugged into all of our different hoses and things like that. You got the hose off the side. You have the little piece over there. You got to check to make sure all those things are plugged in. You're going to connect all these, pop your things, tighten yourself up. You have your lanyard for zero delay. This is basically going to be attached over here. We're not going to worry about that too much. We're going to make sure our rudder pedals and everything like that is adjusted. Right now, they won't even move on us. In the real plane, I don't know if they have this detail modeled. 50-50, 50-50. There's the pedal adjuster. Yeah, you could actually pull this and go and adjust the direction and angle of the pedals to make it more comfortable for you. Now we go ahead and connect all our oxygen hosers, and we get the canopy safety initiator pin. All those pins have already been removed for us. That makes it pretty easy for us so far. Popping down, if pressure suit is connected, plug everything in, external power unit connected and turned on. So to turn on the external unit, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to actually take this little lady setup and click on call for EPU. When you call for the EPU, some folks actually come over, grab you a ladder, they plug you into this lovely, lovely old school Atlas Copco. So the thing is, we have no battery switch on this aircraft. That's just not how this plane works. This version of the plane works, I should say. So what I'm going to do is press EPU toggle. As soon as you push that button, everything's going to click, 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 and snap, and you get a bunch of relays and things all popping all around you, getting ready to go. You'll notice that we're indicating fuel quantity. I think they got the switch backwards. I'm pretty confident they have, because we have tip tanks, not pylon tanks. But whatever, as long as it sucks fuel out of it, don't care. We'll go ahead and hide that now that we have the EPU all nice and connected for us. Okay, so our next item, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure all of our circuit breakers are in on this side. Taking a look here, looks good, looks good, looks good, delightful. We're going to make sure our UHF antenna switch, which we don't have control over, so we're just going to ignore that and keep moving on here. Again, you have a couple different options for that as well. Your emergency UHF radio, we don't have that. UHF command radio, aha! So this one's pretty straightforward. You have two modes. You have pre-selected mode and you have manual mode. If you're just tooling around in Flight Sim, I recommend keeping into man mode so you don't make yourself insane. You do want to make sure your volume's turned up loud enough that you can actually hear what people are saying. I like to put it on there. And then we have a couple different settings here. You have TR, simply meaning transmit and reset. And you also have the ability to go ahead and put a ground guard frequency. And you even have an ADF function on it as well. I just put it on TR for Flight Sim. So what you're going to want to do now is you're going to want to dial in the frequency of whatever we have for ATIS here. So unfortunately, we don't have that. We do have clearance, though, and we do have ground. That's a 1218. So we're going to hold the mouse over it. Go ahead and wheel the mouse. 121. Pop this up to 8. Just like that. And now we are on 121.8. Sometimes this gets a little stuck and you can't figure out which one you're on. 121.75, 8. That's the one we want to be on. So now we're ready to go. If you're using the preset option, there's actually a little knob right up in the front. You go click, 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 and set it to whatever you want to do as far as your presets goes. I have not found the file yet to dial these in manually, so I'm not about to go to war with it. That'll probably be a subject of a different video on a different day. Let's go ahead and grab our checklist again and see how we're doing so far. Let's see. Good, 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 good. Stability switches. We're going to make sure those are all down, which they all are. We have our APC cutout, which is an important stability control. It is disabled. Pylon jettison and all that stuff is all going to be down here. Believe it or not, most of your pylon jettison controls are actually between your legs. You want to make sure that this one is basically set to the off switch. Coming up here, you're going to want to make sure all these are going to be disabled, although for the most part, we can't actually click a lot of these. We can test the lights on it, but that's about as much as we could do, which is kind of a bummer. You can do the two wingtip tanks, and then if we needed to do manual jettison, we could actually come in here and pop those. But again, we can't do that because we don't have that as an option here. All right, camera shutter. Refueling switch is already off. We did that previously. Let's see, moving on to the next page. Fuel set off, it should be down. This is the switch. You want to make sure that's down. The clip is down, which it is. Auxiliary trim selector, we're going to make sure that's set to trim, which we're all set to. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I can stick my head over here and kind of take a look at these switches. Woo! Ho-ho! Let's see, it looks good. Rudder trim is good. Auxiliary trim doesn't even have an option here, so I'm not going to stress about it too much. Now what I'm going to do is radar control panel. We're going to grab this and we're going to twist it all the way to the left to make sure that's completely off. You're not really supposed to be running the radar on the ground if you know what's good for you. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go and make sure that our AA scan switch is off. That's off. AGM power switch is off. Wing flap lever. We're going to make sure it's all the way up. Click, click. Looks like it's in the up position. I like this little thing to catch it. I think that's a nice touch. Speed brake switch. So we're just going to tap, tap, pop it in. That would be the switch at the top. I can push it all I want. Nothing actually changes on us. I'm not worried about it. We're going to have our landing gear light here. It should be red warning light. Should be out. If we take a look here, the red light is out. So I'm not panicking about that at any means. We're going to make sure the green indicators should be all lit, which they boop, 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 are well lit. So I'm not going to worry about that. All right, next item we're going to look for is landing and taxi lights. That's going to be a combined switch on this one. It's this little switch here. We have the landing light, and of course we have the taxi light too. You can just kind of click it to pop it, whatever mode you want to be there. Anti-skid, drag shoot is this handle here. Make sure that's pushed in. You don't want that out. Armament control panel, that's all off. Manual landing gear should be stowed. We're just going to confirm this one. We have a bunch of these little yellow emergency pull the handles in an emergency kind of situation. And you can see those are all tapped in, so I don't have to worry about it. We're going to check to make sure the clock is reading correctly. It should be, let's see, about 9:56 in the morning. Sounds good to me. Airspeed marker. We're just going to set this for our initial airspeed. Obviously, a rotate speed on this one with a weight like this could be right around 170 knots. So I'm going to go pop it on 170 now. We're also going to go double check to make sure the phi is set. What's the phi? So this little instrument right here is basically our position and homing indicator. It's an all-in-one tool for kind of identifying where you are. It's got this little switch on the top, which allows you to select your setting, and it's got this little funky needle with this thing that says GRIV. GRIV is your magnetic deviation. I should say, I'm sorry, a magnetic variation. A compass is devious. A map can vary. That's the way you got to always remember that one. So for example, if I knew my magnetic variation was 7 degrees to the west, I could come in here and straight for this aircraft is actually now where this needle is poking. Now you're sitting here going, well, how are we supposed to know what the GRIV is for a particular spot? Aha, they got you covered. So if you go back to the tool here, there's actually a tool for this. So you can dial in the UTM zone from the zone. Since we're way out here in Nevada, I can see that 12 seems to be my lucky zone here. So I type in 12, I press compute. It goes ahead and types in -69, which is absolutely worthless for us. So unfortunately, I've used this completely backwards. So what I'll have to do is go poke online real fast and see exactly where it is. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be, let's see, 12 is supposed to be, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't calculate the rest of it. 12S, I think, is what it's supposed to be. Let's try that again. Nope. Okay, I'll be right back. All right, I played around with it a little bit and just went online, got annoyed at it. So the magnetic variation, it looks like, grabbing that sucker real quickly here, is going to be minus 11. So that's a shame on me for not doing that one in advance, but oh well, what am I going to do? So I'm going to go ahead and flip back over the simulator real quick. Whoop. And let's go ahead and dial that in. So we're going to grab this one. Remember, it's to the east. So we're going to set this to minus 11 east. And now straight for this aircraft is actually right there. It's kind of an interesting little system that you have to work with. But hey, that's part of the fun, as they say. All right, so that's been set up. Attitude indicator, we can't do anything about this until we get the thing boosted up. Obviously, we can cage this sucker if we wanted, but again, we can't even do anything with this right now because, like I said, it's dorped. All right, warning flag is off. Attitude sphere is good. Accelerometer, we're going to come over here. Boop, push a button. Good to go. Weapon selector, all that's been set. Canopy, ram, 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 ram. Storm lights is over here. It should be off, which it is. We're going to double check. Generator switches are on. The switches should be down, which is good. Canopy fogger. Okay, we're going to do a fuel warning test real quickly. Testing that's real quickly. Just click this. It goes, shuts off. There should have been a light that came on, but I'm not worried about it too much there. All right, looks good. We're going to make sure that we have enough oxygen. Looks like we're carrying 10, which is good. Coming down here, the PSI is at 500, which is way, way, way more than enough. Looks like we only need 4. Pressure gauge is good. System good. We're supposed to test the oxygen. Easy to do. Flip this sucker on. You're going to go put down to test mask. Okay. I forgot how cold that oxygen can be. You got to watch out for that sometimes. All right, Tachyon control panel should be off, which it is. The master's IFS control, which I found you have to put it to this mode to actually work, but I'm not panicking about that too much. IFF is good. We can't touch any of this stuff here, which is a shame because these are fun to play with. Dual timers. Would it be fun if we could use these? Nope. Inertial navigation panel, as required. We're going to set this to standby, and then we're going to snap it to the line. When this light goes out, we'll be ready to use it. Fresh air scoop lever. So coming down here, fresh air scoop. We're just going to make sure that's all set. Looks good to me. And let's go ahead and pop down here. Cockpit temperature should be set to auto. We're going to set it to the temperature I like. Obviously, none of this works. We're going to make sure pitot heat is off. We're going to go ahead and take a look at ventilated soup blower. That's good. Now we can turn that sucker on anytime if we wanted to. Click. Let's see here. That looks good. We're going to turn that one on just to keep ourselves warm. And why not as well turn that one on too. It's not going to do anything. Fine navigation. We're not using fine navigation today, but this is where you'd actually select what waypoint. Unfortunately, this wind unit does not work yet. Hopefully, this is something that can fix. Also, this important switch here does not work yet. So again, at some point, I'm sure they'll fix it. Let's see here, fine navigation, lighting control panel, that's obvious. We're going to switch that to the bright position. Of course, this is nope, so we're going to set that to steady. We do not have a beacon light on this one, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Circuit breakers on this side of the aircraft, surprise, none. So we're not going to worry about that. Control panel is good, C2 mag and sync, we can't do anything about that right now. Camera shutter switch, rocket select switch, align. We've already set align. The green light will go out when it's ready to be used. Air refueling light switch. We've already taken care of that, but one thing I do want to do. Good, that handle is closed, so I'm actually pretty happy about that as well. They put some light. There's the beacon switch. I'm sorry. I was making things up as I was going along, but I shouldn't do that. And now that one's good. Oh, there's a rocket switch. Yeah, I had a feeling that switch wasn't going to work. I don't need to panic about it too much. Cool, moving on. Let's see here. Starting engine. Here we go. So one thing you probably notice is you got this web connect thing going on right here. And if you wonder what that's all about, basically the reason that indicates that is because in this aircraft, it uses a web server for the purposes of rendering the actual radar image. Now, I'm not going to lie. I've not actually gotten the radar image to work yet. So, of course, as the blind teach the blind, hopefully I'll get at some point the ability to do that so I can show you what it looks like. But if you're looking to make that message at least go away, if you take a look at your desktop itself and you're inside your main folder here, what you can do is you can go into HTML UI, Pages, vCockpit, Instruments, Nav Systems, and there's this little thing that says Web icon. You just double click it. What that's going to do is in the bottom right corner, it's going to turn on a little application here, which is actually going to make the radar normally work. So now that that's flipped on, at least we can have that get out of our face so we don't have to worry about it as much. All right, let's move on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing started. So this thing's pretty easy to start, fortunately. And it actually sounds amazing because they do a really good job. So there's a couple different things we need to do when we start. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to select one of the start switches here. You're going to press and hold it. And what's going to happen is once you get yourself up to about 10%, you're going to take your throttle, go clink, and you're going to snap it over the little detent here, which is going to allow fuel to come into the engine. Old school, but it works great. All right, let's go ahead and give this thing a try. So start switch, start and release. We're going to press and hold, and then we're going to release. By the way, you want to use the left starter on even days, the right starter on odd days. I don't really matter. I'm just going to use my left. You're going to hear the little click, 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 click in a second. 10%. We're just going to push it past the detent. And oil pressure's coming up. That'll do it. Come on. Got it. All right, so once the aircraft gets enough juice going there, it's going to start firing itself up automatically. Basically, we just said, okay, you can send some air through the hose now, and then they send air through the hose into the compressor, and off we go. Take a look here. Everything's good. We want to confirm fuel flow is accurate. Fuel flow looks good. Oil pressure's coming up. Temperature's kind of low. Percent RPM. Of course, our generator and all warning lights are all going to pop off on themselves all in a second. Almost there. And it should just about be, everything should pop off. And we are good. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect electrical power, which we are. We go ahead and take a look at all of our engine instruments to make sure there's no shenanigans or goings-ons. So let's see, we're about 410 to 420 degrees here. We're supposed to be, yeah, we're plenty. Let's see, our RPM's good. Nozzle position should be good. Our fuel flow, well, kind of low, but good. Oil pressure is 12 psi. We're plenty. Let's see, oil quantity. We're probably pretty good on that. Take a look. Looks good. Looks good. Fuel flow, pretty low, actually. All right, so now we're going to switch to a line, which we did already. Pop it over to the nav button. And when we do that, all the navigation warnings should go off. If it does not, we can always pop this back to standby, and then back to the line and let that continue its alignment process. Okay, now that that's taken care of, we can go pop on our radar and get it ready. All right, so to do that, we're just going to hold our mouse over this, give that a quick little rotation. It's going to say standby. This thing usually takes a few minutes to warm up, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. Next thing we want to do is we want to set up any of our navigation stuff. We're going to set on our transponder to norm. This is where you go ahead and dial in your frequency. Again, I can dial in any frequency you want. You got to play with this a little bit. Honestly, when I start messing with this, a lot of times what I do is I pull out an external tool. I have my little buddy, the GTN 750, and what I do is I pop this thing up. Let me go ahead and hide that so you folks can see it a little bit better. I pop this thing open, and then usually I set all that because I never trust it. If you're flying something like VATSIM with this plane, for example, you want to make sure that you set this very, very carefully. Otherwise, they're going to get very, very grumpy at you. So you do that, and it should set all your settings for you automatically. Go ahead and close that off. We are good to go. Okay, so now we're just going to take a look at our last couple items here. Pop this one on real fast. Let's see here. IN's good. We're still waiting for that thing to boot up. Oh, the light went out. Good. So now we can go ahead and flip that on. It's ready to go. We're going to close the canopy by clicking that switch real quick. Duck. Where? Wah, wah. And I'm going to go pop down here and double check to see why we're having an engine anti-ice, because I accidentally clicked that switch. Makes sense. All right, well, last thing I like to do before we do anything is I come over here. I like to set my takeoff trim. You just left click on this once. It'll set your stabilizer properly. All right, coming down here, let's see if there's anything glowing. Okay, this is going to be our warm-up. We'll go ahead and check that out when we get over to the taxiway. All right. Let's see here. This is when you would normally run through all your controls. Basically, what you would do through this process is you move each one of your controls, and the crew chief would basically look out the window, and he'd tell you to make sure everything is moving properly. One of the cool things is in the real plane is when you wiggle controls, your hydraulic pressure should drop temporarily. It's one of those little details that really could be better, but what are you going to do? It's such a minor detail as it is. You'd also check the trim chamber. You'd shut systems on and off. You'd test the different APC modes. You'd actually have a guy stand out here. This is a really neat process. He'd grab onto your little AOA vane, and he'd wiggle it back and forth to see if he could trigger all the different warning systems inside the airplane. And now they will check that. One thing we will do, though, is we'll go ahead and double check to make sure that the flaps work correctly. That's one of those things that you do. The first thing is we have this big emergency closure. So what you do is you make sure your parking brake is set. You're going to push that sucker forward just a tiny bit. We're going to make sure the nozzle opens. We're going to pull the handle, and then we're going to jam the handle back in. You could see that it closed itself. As a matter of fact, we could be sitting here at idle, pull it out, and watch what it does. It'll jam that nozzle closed. Next thing what they would do, of course, is you drop the flaps all the way down. You'd go double check and measure really carefully to make sure the BLC is working correctly. In this case, I'm pretty confident the BLC system is working correctly, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And of course, you go through, check all those different steps. These are things we do not need to do today. So what we do want to do, though, is we want to make our way over to the runway. So taking a look right over the side, our runway, again, we're in Nellis Air Force Base. Basically, we need to get right here, and we're pretty much good to go. So what we do is we go ahead and pop up the radio. We go ahead and request a particular thing. Today, we're going to be departing to the north.
Nellis ground red 64 ready to taxi north departure. Red 64 taxi to in hold short of runway 21 right using taxiway alpha. Contact tower on 132.551 ready. Taxi to in hold short runway 21 right using taxiway alpha red 64.
That's it. And off we go. Now, the interesting thing is, this blows my mind a little bit, is you don't have to push the Nosewheel Steering button to make this thing turn on the ground. My brain hurts just thinking about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of force, or we're going to want to make sure a couple different things during taxi. One thing I always like to do is I like to adjust my attitude so that it's actually level. It's one of those little things that I always miss. This is a good time to go ahead and cage this and make sure this works properly. Give it a couple power PM. If we need to set our FI right now, this is a good time. Another thing I would actually do is I'd come over here and I'd snap this mode into IN mode. What that's going to do is it's going to actually make it so that as you're taxiing along on the ground here, you can see the actual direction you're indicating. Now that's kind of nice because if you don't do that, it's going to be all frozen up on you. You're not going to be able to see. One thing you got to watch out for in this plane is when you go to turn, it has a really bad tendency to roll over on itself. So you have to be really, really cautious with turns. Definitely slow this thing down before approaching. One thing you probably noticed is I've gone ahead and got myself that lovely little blue arrows to help us with the taxi. It just kind of makes things a little bit easier when you're at these bigger, more unknown airports. In the real world, someday we'll see like an augmented reality that actually gives us some of this capability. So this wheel for us, if I take a look at it from this side, I'll pop them right there. You can see the wheel is behind us. So when you are taxiing, remember you want to come out and then kick it over rather than just kind of kicking it over right away. That tends to make things a little messy. One thing I will do is if you click on these little mirrors, you can make them get out of your face kind of a thing. Another thing you might want to think about doing if you want to is you can actually come over here, landing light. We can turn on our anti-skid as well. Those are both highly recommended. It's a good little safety feature that's going to get you out of all sorts of trouble depending kind of on what situation you're in there. Coming over to the runway here, everything's going pretty darn smoothly. And like I said, it's a pretty easy plane to operate when you're on the ground, other than its tendency to flip itself over. So always be a little bit careful towards that. Take a look at our fuel quantity. Looks good. Plenty of fuel for the mission. Since we're approaching our taxiing, we'll go ahead and double check a look. Let's see here. Turn and slip. We want to make sure everything's working properly, just like you do in the real world. And we'll go ahead and pop ourselves over to our preferred takeoff checklist. Now this is neat because there's a couple different pieces that you're going to worry about here. But we'll get over the runway first before we do that. This thing is so mean sounding. I definitely like this one over the G91, that's for sure. All right, remember the wheel's behind you, so go a little wide on the turn so that the wheel's driving along the yellow line. Obviously, you don't want to hit anything with the nose, but you shouldn't have to worry about that too much. Get ourselves lined up. I love the fact that these blue arrows have a shadow. I feel like that's an unnecessary detail. Just a teeny tiny bit of boost. And again, this thing wants to fly. It really wants to fly. So you got to kind of be mindful of it, that's all. Oh, what a beautiful day. You got Vegas over there. Maybe we'll buzz the strip real fast. I'd love to have a combat-ready version of these, but I was actually reading the other day that apparently Microsoft is very picky about any sort of aircraft that has any potential to carry guns. So it's one of those things where it's like, can we at least get the little tiny red, the orange circle with a little dot in the middle? I would like that very much. All right, there is our parking spot right there until we're ready for takeoff. We'll have to run up the run-up checks, which is actually pretty straightforward in this aircraft. It's one of those things I'm always tickled by. I'm going to go ahead and hit the brakes a little bit here. We're supposed to stop before the line, so I'm going to make sure I stop before the line. Oh, I noticed it just told me where to go before I even got there. All right, let's go get our handy-dandy checklist again. Boing. And let's see what we need to do. All right, before takeoff checklist, we're going to go ahead and engage the parking brake first to make sure we don't go rolling around. Wing flaps get snapped to the takeoff position. We're going to go click. We're going to double check to make sure the two tails tell us that they're in the correct position. TO, that's good. Initial wheel is locked. I can't move. My seat's too tight. All right, spurs are connected, so I can get myself out if I had to. Seatbelt's ready. Speed brake's in. We're going to go ahead and tap it. This little switch right here. We're going to make sure the canopy is locked, which it is. Oxygen, we're going to turn it on. Check. Looks good. We're going to make sure the radios, IFF, and TACAN are enabled. Oh, we've already enabled everything. We'll turn on our TACAN. Not that we have any frequencies dialed into it at the moment. Ejector seat pen's good. Defogger, we don't need it. Stabilizer trim. We're going to go double check it one more time. I'm going to click right here. Stabilizer trim set. Anti-collision light, assuming you have one, is going to be the switch over on the far side. We've got the beacon light. It's turned on. We're good to go. Coming down here, we're going to do the engine check. Now, this one's kind of fun. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to jam it into military power, and then as soon as it does it, you're supposed to basically reduce the throttle to see if the engine cuts out on you. Now, this is just one of those kind of funny things. So, okay, here we go. Definitely hold the brakes. Hold the brakes. Here we go. Boost it to full power, and cut it. See if it dies. And then we hold it at 80. Everything checks. All right, pull it back. That's all we really had to do. All we're checking there is for compressor stalls. Pitot heat and anti-ice, so we'll go ahead and pop onto the anti-ice switch here. Let's see here. Pitot heat on. We don't need engine anti-ice at this time. All right, let's take off. So now when you take this thing off, it's pretty easy. The only thing you really have to watch out for, other than making sure you request takeoff permission before you go choo-chooing onto the runway, although apparently, there it is.
Dulles Tower red.
Although one of the interesting things with that, which I actually found kind of funny, was the fact that when you take off in this aircraft, you have to be so fast to get the landing gear retracted so you don't destroy them on the way up. Just one of those interesting things about this plane. But there's a couple strategies that you can use, especially when you're here at Nellis Air Force Base and you have, that much runway in order to do it. All right, we'll go ahead and acknowledge it, and we're good to go. All right, here's what you're going to do. We're going to be using Nosewheel Steering. We've already got that enabled. Throttle's going to be set to military. Military is this little line here. You push it up, it goes click, and then you push it over to get into the afterburner mode. This is different than the F-18. Then we go, once it's all fired up, we're going to do brakes release, throttle minimum, sector afterburner. That basically means push this thing not all the way to the front, put it basically to sector 1, which is basically going to be the end here. I like to think of it as 95%. It's whatever works for you. Take a look at your engine instruments. Keep it going. Once you get up to your takeoff speed, which for us is going to be about 180, 190, which is insane, you're ready to go ahead and get this thing airborne. Once you get airborne, you have to slap up your landing gear faster than you've ever done. Make sure you get rid of your flaps as fast as you can. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a really, really bad spot in a big hurry. All right, let's do it to it. So we're going to smoothly apply this up into full military. We're going to make sure the engine's working properly. Okay, now we're going to release the brakes. We're going to pop this sucker into, like I said, that first afterburner stage, which is right about there. And then we just go. Oh my gosh. I'd be being pushed hard in the seats. There's 150 knots. Oh my gosh. When your airplane's landing speed is faster than you've ever been in your life. Nose up. Positive rate. Gear up. You're going to get a landing gear unsafe warning. I'm going to let that nose come down just a tiny bit. Bring up that notch of flaps before you get to 250. Give it a second to mellow. Give it a second to mellow. And we're going to back ourselves right out of that first stage of afterburner, and we are now airborne. Man, what a rush. This is a pretty slick plane. Got to do one of these dramatic kind of bank-offs like this. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and flip off the landing light. If you've not done so, it's a switch over here. We're all set. So that concludes it for the first video in the series. Like I said, I just wanted to take a few moments to kind of just show you what it's like to get this thing all started up, as well as what you need to do to get this thing airborne. This time, of course, we could come over here and we could start popping on different systems. We could flip on the radar, which, like I said, I'm having some issues with. I can't seem to get it to work. I'm pretty confident there's something with my browser that's like incompatible or something like that. But from what I have read, the air-to-air radar actually does work, and I'll have to play with that another day. Other than that, we'll see you next time for navigation. See ya. Enjoy.